In the far reaches of the galaxy, where stars burned brighter and civilizations thrived in ways unimaginable to humanity, there existed the Zorathian Empire. The Zorathians were a proud and powerful race, known for their advanced technology, formidable warriors, and a matriarchal society ruled by an empress. The current ruler, Empress Valera, was a figure of both awe and fear. Her beauty was unmatched, her intellect unparalleled, and her strength, both physical and mental, was the stuff of legends. But Empress Valera had a problem. A problem that no amount of technological advancement or political maneuvering could solve. She needed a mate. Not just any mate, but a strong one. A mate who could stand by her side, who could match her in strength, intelligence, and ambition. A mate who could help her secure the future of the Zorathian Empire. The Zorathian warriors, though fierce and loyal, had all failed to meet her standards. They were strong, yes, but they lacked the depth, the creativity, the resilience that Valera sought. She had tested them all, every champion, every general, every noble, and none had satisfied her. The Empress was growing desperate. The council was pressuring her to choose a mate, to produce an heir, to secure the future of the empire. But Valera refused to settle for anything less than perfection. It was during one of her many council meetings that the idea was first proposed. Perhaps, suggested one of her advisors, we should look beyond our own kind. There are other species in the galaxy, some of whom possess qualities that might meet your requirements. Valera considered this. She had heard of the humans, a relatively young species from a small blue planet called Earth. They were not as advanced as the Zorathians, but they were known for their resilience, their adaptability, and their unyielding spirit. They were a species that had faced countless challenges and had always found a way to overcome them. Perhaps, just perhaps, a human could be the mate she sought. And so, the Empress made a decision. She would travel to Earth herself, to find a human male who could meet her standards. She would test him, challenge him, and if he proved worthy, she would take him as her mate. The journey to Earth was long, but Valera was determined. She arrived in secret, her ship cloaked, her presence unknown to the humans. She observed them from afar, studying their behavior, their culture, their strengths and weaknesses. And then, she found him. His name was Ethan Drake, a former soldier, now a private security consultant. He was tall, muscular, with piercing blue eyes and a strong jawline. But it wasn't just his physical appearance that caught Valera's attention. It was the way he carried himself, the way he handled challenges, the way he interacted with others. There was a quiet strength about him, a resilience that Valera found intriguing. She decided to approach him, to test him, to see if he was truly the one she had been searching for. And so, one evening, as Ethan was walking home from work, he found himself face to face with the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. "Ethan Drake," she said, her voice smooth and commanding. "I am Empress Valera of the Zorathian Empire. I have come to Earth to find a mate, and I believe you may be the one I have been searching for." Ethan was stunned. He had heard of aliens, of course, but he had never expected to meet one, let alone an empress. And yet, there she was, standing before him, her presence both intimidating and alluring. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice steady despite the shock. "I want to test you," Valera replied. "I want to see if you are worthy of being my mate. If you succeed, you will have a place by my side, as the consort of the Empress of the Zorathian Empire. If you fail, you will be returned to Earth, and I will continue my search." Ethan considered this. It was an offer unlike any he had ever received. The chance to be the mate of an alien empress, to rule an empire, to have power and influence beyond his wildest dreams. But it was also a risk. He had no idea what Valera's tests would entail, or whether he would be able to pass them. But Ethan was not one to back down from a challenge. He had faced danger before, had overcome obstacles that would have broken lesser men. And so, he made his decision. I accept your challenge, he said, his voice firm. Test me, Empress Valera. I will prove myself worthy. Valera smiled, a smile that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. Very well, she said. The first test begins now. And with that, the journey of Ethan Drake, the human who would become the mate of the Alien Empress, began. The first test was one of physical strength and endurance. Valera led Ethan to a remote location, far from the prying eyes of humanity. The landscape was harsh, with jagged rocks, scorching heat, and an atmosphere that was barely breathable. It was a place designed to push the limits of any being, and Valera wanted to see if Ethan could survive. You will cross this terrain, Valera said, pointing to the distant horizon. You will reach the other side, where a beacon awaits. Activate it, and you will have passed the first test. Ethan nodded, his eyes scanning the treacherous landscape. He knew this would not be easy, but he was determined to succeed. He took a deep breath, adjusted his gear, and set off. The journey was grueling. The heat was unbearable, the rocks sharp and unforgiving. Ethan's muscles ached, his throat was dry, and his vision blurred from the sweat pouring down his face. But he pressed on, driven by a combination of determination and the desire to prove himself to Valera. As he climbed over a particularly steep ridge, Ethan encountered his first real challenge, a deep chasm that stretched as far as the eye could see. There was no way around it, and the only way across was a narrow, unstable bridge made of ancient, crumbling stone. Ethan hesitated for a moment, weighing his options. He could try to find another way, but that would take time he didn't have. Or he could risk crossing the bridge, knowing that one wrong step could mean certain death. He chose the latter. Carefully, Ethan stepped onto the bridge, testing its stability with each step. The stones shifted beneath his weight, and he could feel the bridge swaying precariously. But he kept his focus, his eyes fixed on the other side, his mind clear and determined. Halfway across, the bridge began to collapse. Stones tumbled into the chasm below, and Ethan had to move quickly to avoid being caught in the collapse. He leaped from one unstable stone to another, his heart pounding in his chest, his muscles screaming in protest. But he made it. With one final, desperate leap, Ethan reached the other side, collapsing onto the solid ground as the bridge crumbled into the abyss behind him. He lay there for a moment, catching his breath, his body trembling with exhaustion. But he had done it. He had crossed the chasm, and the beacon was within reach. Summoning the last of his strength, Ethan pushed himself to his feet and stumbled towards the beacon. It was a simple device, a small, glowing orb mounted on a pedestal. With a trembling hand, Ethan reached out and activated it. The beacon flared to life, its light piercing the harsh landscape. And then, Valera appeared, materializing out of thin air as if she had been watching him the entire time. You have passed the first test, she said, her voice filled with a mixture of approval and surprise. I did not expect you to succeed so quickly. Ethan managed a weak smile. I told you I would prove myself, he said, his voice hoarse. Valera nodded. Indeed you have. But this was only the beginning. The next test will be more challenging. Are you ready? Ethan took a deep breath, his body still aching from the ordeal. But he knew he couldn't stop now. He had come too far to give up. I'm ready, he said, his voice steady. Valera smiled. Very well. The second test begins now. And with that, Ethan's journey continued, the challenges growing more difficult, the stakes higher than ever before. The second test was one of intellect and strategy. Valera led Ethan to a vast, labyrinthine structure, a maze of twisting corridors, hidden traps, and puzzles that required both wit and wisdom to solve. You must navigate this maze, Valera explained. At its center lies a relic of great importance to the Zorathian Empire. Retrieve it, and you will have passed the second test. Ethan nodded, his mind already racing as he considered the challenges ahead. He knew that brute strength alone would not be enough to succeed in this test. He would need to think critically, to solve problems, to outsmart the maze itself. As he entered the maze, Ethan quickly realized that it was far more complex than he had anticipated. The corridors twisted and turned in ways that defied logic, and the walls seemed to shift and change, making it nearly impossible to keep track of his path. But Ethan was resourceful. He used his training as a soldier to mark his path, creating a mental map of the maze as he went. He also paid close attention to his surroundings, looking for clues that might help him navigate the labyrinth. The first puzzle he encountered was a series of pressure plates on the floor, each marked with a different symbol. Ethan studied the symbols carefully, trying to decipher their meaning. He noticed that they corresponded to the constellations in the night sky, and he used his knowledge of astronomy to determine the correct sequence. As he stepped on the plates in the correct order, a hidden door slid open, revealing the next section of the maze. But the challenges only grew more difficult from there. Ethan encountered riddles that required him to think outside the box, traps that tested his reflexes and agility, and obstacles that seemed insurmountable. But he persevered, using his intellect and determination to overcome each challenge. One of the most difficult obstacles was a room filled with mirrors, each reflecting a different version of himself. Ethan had to determine which reflection was real and which were illusions. It was a test of perception and self-awareness, and it took all of Ethan's focus to solve. Finally, after what felt like hours, Ethan reached the center of the maze. There, on a pedestal, was the relic Valera had spoken of, a small, intricately carved crystal that glowed with an otherworldly light. Ethan reached out and took the crystal, feeling a surge of triumph as he did so. He had done it. He had navigated the maze, solved the puzzles, and retrieved the relic. As he turned to leave, Valera appeared once again, her expression one of approval. "You have passed the second test," she said. "You have proven that you possess not only physical strength, but also the intellect and strategy required to be my mate." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of pride. But he knew that the challenges were far from over. "What's next?" he asked, his voice steady. Valera smiled. "The third test will be the most difficult yet. It will test your courage, your resolve, and your ability to face your deepest fears. Are you ready?" Ethan took a deep breath, his mind already preparing for the next challenge. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. "I'm ready," he said. Valera nodded. "Very well. The third test begins now." And with that, Ethan's journey continued, the challenges growing more intense, the stakes higher than ever before. The third test was one of courage and resolve. Valera led Ethan to a dark, foreboding cavern, its entrance shrouded in shadows. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and the sound of distant whispers echoed through the cavern. "This is the cavern of fear," Valera explained. "It is a place where your deepest fears will be made manifest. You must face them, conquer them, and emerge victorious. Only then will you have passed the third test." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that this would be the most difficult test yet. He had faced physical challenges and intellectual puzzles, but this would test his very soul. As he stepped into the cavern, the darkness seemed to close in around him. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He knew that his fears were about to be brought to life, and he braced himself for what was to come. The first fear that manifested was one of failure. Ethan found himself standing on a battlefield, surrounded by the bodies of his fallen comrades. The weight of their deaths pressed down on him, and he felt a crushing sense of guilt and despair. But Ethan refused to give in to the fear. He reminded himself that he had done everything he could, that he had fought with honor and courage. He took a deep breath, steadied his mind, and pushed the fear aside. The next fear was one of rejection. Ethan found himself standing before Valera, who looked at him with cold, disapproving eyes. She told him that he was unworthy, that he would never be her mate, that he would always be alone. This fear struck deeper than the first, but Ethan refused to let it consume him. He reminded himself that he had already proven his worth, that he had faced challenges and overcome them. He looked Valera in the eye and told her that he would not be rejected, that he would prove himself worthy no matter what. The final fear was one of death. Ethan found himself standing on the edge of a precipice, the void below him yawning wide. He felt the pull of the abyss, the temptation to let go, to end the pain and the struggle. But Ethan refused to give in. He reminded himself that life was precious, that he had a purpose, that he had a future. He took a step back from the edge, his resolve stronger than ever. As the fears dissipated, the cavern began to brighten, the oppressive energy lifting. Ethan felt a sense of relief, of triumph. He had faced his deepest fears and emerged victorious. Valera appeared once again, her expression one of admiration. "You have passed the third test," she said. "You have proven that you possess the courage and resolve required to be my mate." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of pride. But he knew that the challenges were far from over. "What's next?" he asked, his voice steady. Valera smiled. "The fourth test will be the most personal yet. It will test your heart, your compassion, and your ability to connect with others. Are you ready?" Ethan took a deep breath, his mind already preparing for the next challenge. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. "I'm ready," he said. Valera nodded. "Very well. The fourth test begins now." And with that, Ethan's journey continued, the challenges growing more intense, the stakes higher than ever before. The fourth test was one of compassion and connection. Valera led Ethan to a small, peaceful village on the outskirts of the Zorathian Empire. The village was home to a group of refugees, displaced by a recent conflict. They were a mix of different species, all struggling to rebuild their lives. "Your task is simple," Valera explained. "You must help these people. You must show them compassion, kindness, and understanding. You must connect with them on a personal level, and in doing so, you will prove that you possess the qualities required to be my mate." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with empathy. He had always been a man of action, but he also understood the importance of compassion. He knew that this test would require him to open his heart, to connect with others in a way that he hadn't before. As he entered the village, Ethan was struck by the resilience of the people. Despite their hardships, they were working together, supporting each other, and trying to rebuild their lives. Ethan knew that he had to do whatever he could to help them. He started by listening. He spent time with the villagers, hearing their stories, understanding their struggles, and offering words of encouragement. He helped them with physical tasks, using his strength to rebuild homes, clear debris, and plant crops. He also used his skills as a former soldier to train them in self-defense, giving them the tools they needed to protect themselves. But more than anything, Ethan showed them kindness. He treated them with respect, with dignity, with compassion. He connected with them on a personal level, forming bonds that went beyond mere words. One of the villagers, a young girl named Lyra, had lost her family in the conflict. She was withdrawn, quiet, and had lost hope. Ethan spent time with her, telling her stories, playing games, and showing her that there was still joy to be found in the world. Over time, Lyra began to open up. She smiled, laughed, and even started to help the other villagers. Ethan knew that he had made a difference, not just in her life, but in the lives of everyone in the village. As the days passed, the village began to thrive. The people were happier, more hopeful, and more united. Ethan knew that he had done what he could, and he felt a sense of fulfillment that he had never experienced before. Valera appeared once again, her expression one of deep admiration. "You have passed the fourth test," she said. "You have proven that you possess the compassion and connection required to be my mate." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of pride. But he knew that the challenges were far from over. "What's next?" he asked, his voice steady. Valera smiled. "The final test will be the most challenging yet. It will test your loyalty, your commitment, and your ability to stand by my side as my equal. Are you ready?" Ethan took a deep breath, his mind already preparing for the next challenge. He had come this far, and he wasn't about to back down now. "I'm ready," he said. Valera nodded. "Very well. The final test begins now." And with that, Ethan's journey continued, the challenges growing more intense, the stakes higher than ever before. Epilogue: The Mate of the Empress. The final test was one of loyalty and commitment. Valera led Ethan to the heart of the Zorathian Empire, to the throne room where she ruled. The room was filled with the most powerful and influential beings in the galaxy, all watching as Ethan stood before the Empress. "Ethan Drake," Valera said, her voice echoing through the chamber. "You have proven yourself to be strong, intelligent, courageous, and compassionate.